News here on NBA Today. Our senior insider Adrian Wojnarowski reporting that Kyrie Irving has requested a trade from the Brooklyn Nets. Now, Woj just said on this show that did not come yet with a list of preferred destinations. You know it's big news when Stephen A. Smith calls into the show for his reaction. Stephen A., thank you so much for taking a little bit of time. What do you think of this trade request?
Idiotic. Let's get that out the way. Here's a guy in Kyrie Irving that for the last 3 years who's gotten most of his money but missed more than 50% of his games. Enters the last year after this offseason. Obviously, the situation that he got himself into earlier this year was unfortunate, but he resurrected himself from that. Was playing spectacular basketball, leading vote getter amongst guards for the All-Star game, playing outstanding basketball and reminding everybody what an absolute flat-out superstar basketball player he is. No one questioned that. All we ever questioned was, can the man go the rest of the season without being any kind of distraction if he's going to have a chance to get his money? And lo and behold, he pulls this. And why? Because the Brooklyn Nets had the temerity, the unmitigated goal, to say, play the season. We'll see. Because we haven't had you for a full season without any drama. And here he is again. For a guy that's looking for a long-term deal from another team, there is no question about what you're getting when Kyrie Irving is on the basketball court. The only question mark regarding him is his commitment to not being a distraction and to going out there and performing. And the fact that he's made headlines with this, all it did was serve to remind everybody out there he's spectacular. We'd love to have him in our uniform so long as we don't have to make a long-term investment in him because he cannot be trusted. He just reminded the basketball world of that.
So, Stephen A., if you're a GM for some of the teams that we've talked about that have the space to trade for Kyrie Irving, the Clippers, the Lakers, the Mavericks, the Heat, as some of those teams, would you do it? Would you make that deal?
It depends on what I'm getting rid of in return for his services. If I'm getting a superior basketball player, and in the midst of all of that, I'm getting rid of players and contracts that I don't want on my docket, sure. But that's entirely different, Malika, than making a long-term commitment in him. Because you're not obligated to do that just because you trade for him. He can talk about where he wants to go all he wants to. But if there's not a market for him to get a long-term contract, then he has to accept whether it's staying in Brooklyn or going wherever he ends up going. Because there's not a market out there for somebody that's willing to give him a long-term deal. That's the situation. He doesn't have the leverage that he thinks he has.
I'm looking at our news bar. It says that Kyrie has maintained interest in the Los Angeles Lakers. Before we let you go, Stephen A., your thoughts on a potential reunion between LeBron James and Kyrie Irving?
That would be absolutely spectacular if the Lakers were able to pull it off. But in order to do that, they'd have to send away probably Russell Westbrook. If you do that to get the $47 million off your books, Brooklyn would have to reunite KD with Russell Westbrook. How you think KD gonna feel about that?
Right.
And so, regardless of what everybody is saying, I consider that scenario highly unlikely. Impossible? No, but highly unlikely. I'd love to see Kyrie Irving in Tinseltown with LeBron and Anthony Davis and see what that materializes into. But the bottom line is the Lakers would have to give up a haul to get him. The Brooklyn Nets would have to accept and embrace that haul, and that's a lot to expect. So I consider that to be a highly unlikely scenario.
Stephen A., thank you so much for joining us here on NBA Today. So much more from Stephen A., his thoughts on this trade request coming up tomorrow on First Take. For now, though, I want to bring it back to our panel because, Chiney, it comes down to a couple of questions. It comes down to priorities, right? That's what we're looking at here.
Yeah, in the real time of discussing Kyrie Irving making this request out of the Brooklyn Nets, I really think it comes down to three things right here. And I wrote them down because your girl's a nerd, right? You know me. One, does he want his money? Two, does he want to leave?
Okay.
Or three, does he want both? Now, in the case of one, does he want, I'll talk nerdy to you every day. Does he want his money? To me, this seems like the most logical route, just because this is forcing the hand of the conversation for the contract extension, and that's what he wants the most right now. Two, does he want to leave? Well, why would you want to leave a team without KD, who, mind you, if KD were playing, I would be priming my vote for MVP for Kevin Durant. Leave a team with your best friend, Kevin Durant, who's currently, without him, still fourth in the East. And a lot of people are saying he's been good. He's been a good teammate. He's been a professional. The consistency that we've seen the last 20 or so games. Why would you want to leave that? And also, does he want both? Does he want his money and to leave? That's a really difficult scenario for what Stephen A. just said. In that package, if he were to go to, for example, a Lakers, how are you going to send a Russell Westbrook, to Brooklyn, reuniting him with KD? That just seems like a lot of work to do. And you have to know that Kyrie, you'd have to be taking, less, Kyrie individually, but then the Nets want more if they're going to move him off. So that's why I come back to A. It seems like it's a money move. It's a business move. It's forcing the hand. And I don't think he would do this without KD knowing, saying, hey, I understand this is going to make headlines. This is going to be the conversation. I think it really comes back to those three things, but starting with the money.
No, I agree. Okay, so I wrote down 15 things. I wrote down 15 reasons why I believe that this is
my next chapter.
Yes. So a part of my thesis that I'm about to write. No, everything that you said was 100% on point. The weird thing when you look up at the situation to me is that, like you said, they are good. And everything was cooking and rolling. Mm-hmm. And it's like, he is so antsy, in my opinion, for that extension. But in that process, one of the things that we all know, your agents test the market. That's what your agents do. Your agents are like, they're talking to other teams, they're talking to other GMs like, hey, what would you guys do? I think Kyrie, he really wants an extension. We saw James Harden. James Harden told the Nets, hey, I'm not going to be here. I want to go to Philly. Philly's like, we'll give you the extension, come here, and then they work something out. I think when you look at Kyrie, you're just like, well, Kai, you have to understand that there has to be a market. You can say, I want to go to Miami, I want to go to LA, I want to go this, but the other side of that market is that the Nets have to be willing to take that, and the part about it that makes it more difficult is Kevin Durant is the most important person. So whatever we get back, this has to be something that we believe will be appealing to Kevin Durant, not just our franchise.
Right, and to that point, some new reporting from Woj and our Tim McMahon. The Mavericks, they're reporting, had previous interest on Kyrie Irving and are expected to explore the idea with the Nets ahead of Thursday's trade deadline. This is what Woj and McMahon are reporting. But like most teams, the Mavericks, they've had a significant reluctance, is the way that they're terming this, to make significant offers for Kyrie Irving. So before we head to break, I want to bring Zach Lowe back into this conversation. Zach, just your final thoughts on Kyrie Irving requesting a trade from the Brooklyn Nets.
That it's just hard to believe everything that's happened to the Nets in the last 2 years. You made fun of Chiney, RJ, for writing down stuff. I feel like you need a full flow chart of events and decisions and counter decisions just to map how the greatest theoretical team in the history of sports has now come to this. And of course, the Mavericks have had significant concern, or whatever the terminology is, about trading a lot of stuff for Kyrie Irving. Every team is going to have significant concern about locking him up to an extension that's more than a year or two. Why would you? How could you? Why would you look at the last 4 years? It's what I kept saying about the Nets, even when they were winning 18 of 20. And by the way, pour one out for Jacques Vaughn, who did everything right, everything he could to right the ship in Brooklyn, only for the ship to capsize again, despite his best efforts. But why would you watch the last 4 years and think, oh, it's all going to be fine, it's all going to be good, lock him up $50 million a year for 5 years? It's not going to happen. And next week's going to be interesting. We'll see what happens.
Next week's going to be interesting. I think it's fair to say the soap opera, it continues in Brooklyn. On the other side of this break, Bobby Marks is back with us. He is going to propose some realistic trades for Kyrie Irving.